some people disappear without anyone noticing. But sometimes, someone seems to disappear before they even die. Long before anyone discovered her body, someone had already erased the life she once lived. No name, no history, no family searching, only silence. On a cold November morning in western Norway, the mountains hid a secret that would remain unsolved for more than half a century. And it all began in a place where almost no one ever goes. On November 29th, 1970, a university professor set out for a quiet Sunday hike. With his two young daughters, they followed a narrow trail through a lonely valley surrounded by steep cliffs and heavy mist. Locals had an unusual name for it: Death Valley. The girls didn't know why people called it that. To them, it was simply another walk through nature, until they noticed something lying farther ahead. At first, it didn't even look human. The ground was blackened, burned, silent, and in the middle lay the remains of a woman. Fire had destroyed much of her appearance. There was no way to recognize her face, no obvious clue to tell investigators who she had been. Even before the investigation truly began, it felt as though someone had already removed every trace of her identity. When investigators examined the body, one detail immediately caught their attention. Her hands were tightly clenched, her arms drawn upward toward her chest. Over the years, many people would point to this position as evidence that she had struggled violently in her final moments. But that isn't what the evidence shows. This posture has a scientific explanation. Extreme heat causes muscles and tendons to contract. Forensic experts call it the pugilistic posture. It happens after exposure to intense fire. It does not prove that someone fought before death. That explanation removed one mystery, but it revealed a much larger one, because as investigators looked closer, they discovered something far stranger than the condition of her body. It seemed someone had spent extraordinary effort erasing every clue that could tell the world who this woman really was. The investigation began with the objects scattered around the scene: an umbrella, burned bottles, a wristwatch, small, ordinary belongings, the kind any traveler might carry. But investigators quickly noticed that one object wasn't ordinary anymore. The back of the wristwatch had been carefully filed smooth. Where a serial number should have been, there was nothing. Someone had taken the time to erase it, not damaged by accident, not destroyed by fire, deliberately removed. It was the first sign that whoever this woman was, her identity had been stripped away, piece by piece. The mystery deepened. Miles away from the valley, at Bergen railway station, investigators found 2 suitcases waiting in storage. They belonged to the unknown woman. Inside, they found wigs, dark glasses, cosmetics, clothing, foreign currencies, and personal items that seemed carefully chosen to help someone become someone else. This didn't look like the luggage of an ordinary tourist. It looked like someone who expected to change identities whenever necessary. The question wasn't whether she had been hiding. The question was, from whom? Then came the discovery that investigators never forgot. They examined her clothing, one piece after another. Every label had been cut away, every single one. Dresses, coats, shoes, even undergarments. Nothing remained that could reveal where the clothes were made or where they had been bought. This wasn't rushed. It wasn't careless. It required patience, precision, intention. Someone had systematically removed every tiny clue that could lead back to her. By now, investigators realized this wasn't a single act. It was a pattern. The watch had no serial number. The clothing had no labels. The luggage contained disguises. Everywhere they looked, identity had been erased. Whoever planned this understood that the smallest details can reveal the biggest secrets, yet despite all that effort, one thing had escaped erasure: a paper trail inside hotel records across Norway. And those records would reveal that this woman had been living under far more than one name. She checked into hotels under at least 8 different names. Almost every time, she claimed to be Belgian, but something about those identities never quite matched. The spellings changed. The details shifted. It was as if she wanted to leave behind a trail, but never the same trail twice. Investigators collected registration cards from hotel after hotel. Different names, different signatures, yet the handwriting carried familiar patterns. One woman pretending to be many. The question wasn't whether these identities were fake. The question was why she needed so many. City after city, name after name. She appeared, then disappeared again. Bergen, Oslo, Stavanger, Trondheim. One hotel, then another, sometimes staying only briefly before moving on. There was no obvious destination, no clear route, no place that truly seemed like home. Looking at the map, investigators saw movement, but not purpose. It almost felt as though she was making certain no single person would ever know the complete story. Some witnesses described something unusual. On certain nights, she changed hotel rooms more than once. Not because the room was uncomfortable, not because of poor service, but perhaps because she no longer felt safe there. Imagine locking your hotel door, only to decide, minutes later, that you had to leave. A dropped key, an open doorway, a hurried exit. Was someone following her, or was she simply afraid of being found? Decades later, a shoe shop owner in Stavanger shared a memory. They remembered a well-dressed woman, speaking with a foreign accent, calm, polite, almost impossible to forget. She bought a pair of rubber boots, boots that, according to the witness, she never had the chance to wear out. But memories change with time. Details blur. Faces fade. This recollection remains unverified, yet sometimes memories are all history has left behind. Then, investigators discovered something unexpected. a small notebook filled with strange combinations of letters and numbers. At first, it appeared meaningless until parts of it began to make sense. The coded entries matched dates, hotel stays, aliases, 8 names, 1 woman. Yet even after decoding parts of the notebook, investigators still couldn't answer the question that mattered most. Who was she? Because the notebook revealed patterns, but it never revealed her true name. Norway, 1970. A quiet country standing at the edge of the Cold War. NATO to the west, the Soviet Union just beyond the northern frontier. In a place where governments watched borders, strangers were noticed. A traveler with no clear identity could mean absolutely nothing, or everything. Long before anyone knew her story, people began asking a different question. Was this woman simply hiding from her past? Or was she hiding it for someone else? That single possibility would grow into the most famous theory ever attached to the Isdal Woman. But before accepting it, we have to understand why so many people believed it in the first place. The evidence seemed to point in one direction. Wigs, multiple passports under different identities, foreign currency, handwritten codes. Looked at separately, each item could be explained away, but together, they painted a far stranger picture. To many investigators, this no longer resembled the luggage of an ordinary tourist. It resembled preparation, the kind of preparation associated with people trained never to leave a clear trail behind. Newspapers embraced the possibility. Authors expanded it. Television documentaries repeated it. So, the mysterious woman in the Isdal Valley wasn't simply unidentified. She had become a suspect, spy. For more than 5 decades, the espionage theory has dominated this mystery. It appears in headlines, books, television specials, online discussions. It feels convincing because every unanswered question seems to fit neatly inside it. Secret identities, hidden movements, burned belongings, coded notes. But mysteries have a dangerous habit of rewarding the explanations we want most. Sometimes, the most dramatic answer becomes the easiest one to believe, even when belief begins to outrun the evidence. But here, the historical record becomes much quieter. Despite decades of speculation, no government has ever officially confirmed that the Isdal Woman worked as a spy. Not Norway, not Belgium, not Britain, not the Soviet Union. No intelligence agency has publicly identified her. No declassified document has solved the mystery. No official investigation has verified the year. Why? That doesn't prove she wasn't involved in espionage. But it does mean something important. The most famous explanation remains exactly that, an explanation, not a proven fact. The spy theory captured the world's imagination. But headlines are not evidence. When the speculation is stripped away, investigators are left with something much smaller. Objects, documents, bones, teeth, tiny fragments that have remained silent for decades. If the truth still exists, it isn't hidden inside dramatic theories. It may be waiting inside the evidence itself. And surprisingly, one man had preserved exactly the evidence future science would need. While public attention drifted toward espionage, one professor quietly thought about the future. Professor Gilbang preserved the woman's jaw and teeth, not because he knew they held the answer, but because he believed one day science might become better than it was in 1970. It was an ordinary decision, almost invisible, yet decades later, it would become one of the most important choices anyone made in this entire investigation. Sometimes, solving a mystery doesn't begin with a breakthrough. It begins with someone refusing to throw away the evidence. 45 years passed. Then, in 2016, journalists reopened the case. New questions were asked. Old evidence was examined again. Technology had changed. Forensic science had changed. What once seemed impossible was suddenly worth trying again. Documents stored for decades returned to investigators' desks. Dental evidence was re-examined. Modern laboratories became part of a mystery that had begun in another century. For the first time in years, the case was moving forward again. Then, science finally answered one question. Isotope analysis of her teeth suggested she likely spent her childhood somewhere in Eastern or Central Europe. Later in life, she appears to have moved farther west. It wasn't a name. It wasn't an address. It wasn't an identity. But it was real evidence, carefully measured, scientifically tested. For the first time in nearly 50 years, the Isdal Woman had gained something she had never possessed before, a probable place where her story may have begun. Since then, new headlines have appeared, new theories, new claims. Some have suggested specific countries, others even specific identities. But none of those claims have been officially confirmed. Science has moved forward. The investigation has moved forward. Yet her name still remains unknown. Every answer this case produces seems to reveal another question waiting behind it. And that may be the hardest truth of all. She was buried in a zinc-lined coffin, not simply for burial, but for hope. Hope that one day, investigators might recover her remains, identify her, and finally return her name. More than half a century has passed. That hope still waits beneath the earth, quiet, patient, unanswered. 56 years later, we know more about how she disappeared than who she truly was. Perhaps that was always the tragedy, not simply that a woman died, but that someone worked so carefully to erase every trace of the life she once lived. Her suitcase remains. The coded notebook remains. The unanswered questions remain. Only one thing never came back: her name. Some mysteries begin with a death. The mystery of the Isdal Woman may have begun with the disappearance of a name. And after all these years, we are still waiting to hear it.